Yes, sir.
Okay. Basically, we've been talking about the big four, right? The four Avos and Zikin. So now the Gemara is going to put into sharp contrast exactly the differences. We know the differences between the different types of damagers, but besides the differences, what are the actual practical consequences of whether something is in this category, that category? What are the practical differences, not conceptually, but in the outcome, in what you would be obligated and what you wouldn't be obligated? So the Gemara is going to explain it to us in this passage.
Sure.
By typically asking a question as to, what does the Mishnah mean when it says, when it explaining this, like the Gemara is going to see. The Gemara says like this. Back over here. Here. The Mishnah said, Lo hare hashor kare hamave. The ox is not like the case of mave. Mave, which we said is either the ox that eats, right? Or it's a person. According to Rav, it means a person who damages, right? So a shor is not like a person who damages. Maika Amar, what does the Mishnah mean to say? What's it pointing out? Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava Hachika Amar. Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, this is what it means to say. Basically, the Mishnah is trying to explain, why do you need the Torah to enumerate the different types of damages? Why can't we just learn one from the other? You have your shar, you have your bar, you have your mave, you have your hever. Why do you need all four things? Why can't you just say you damage, you pay, right? Why do you need all four different types of categories? So the Mishnah explains, Hadar Amar, the Mishnah explains, you will not be able to learn one from the other. You won't be able to, if you had one, you wouldn't be able to learn the other. And even if you had a shar and mave, right, you would not be able to learn one from the other, right? That's like we explained previously, that if the ox would not be able to learn from the person would not be able to learn from the ox. Each one has its own thing. However, if you have both of them, right, maybe you would be able to learn to the others. No, they both have a life. They both have ruach chaim. What does that mean to say? Maika Omar, Omar Mishash just made the Rav Bava Kama, right? So the Gemara is just explaining the Mishnah. Lichtav Rachmana Tarti. Why don't you say Shor and Mave? And you should learn the other ones from it. Asi continues the Mishnah to say you can't learn one from two, right? Even if you have the first two, you would not be able to learn the third one. Amarava, however, the Kulu Kishadis Bar Binayu, if you had any one of them, plus bar, if you had bar with any one of them, asikulu b'me'atzad, you'd be able to learn all the other ones from the two of them together. If you had the case of bar and any one of the other ones, you'd be able to learn out to the other remaining two.
What does that mean?
That means that if you were to have, let's say we're talking about shor, mave, and hever, right? If you were to pair up shor together with bar, or mave together with bar, or hever together with bar.
Oh, you're saying that from that coupling, you could derive the rest?
Exactly. You could derive the rest.
Having to keep them separate otherwise.
Right. Meaning we're saying that we would not need the Torah to teach me all four. All you need is one of them together with bar. Right. And Rashi goes through the entire, the lengthy explanation of how you would not be able to undo the derivation. It all works out. But the Gemara states it very ambiguously that if you would have one together with bar, you'd be able to learn all the other ones. And so we're left with the question, right? What do you need all of them, right? Why do you need actually the Torah to say all four of them? Mm-hmm. Right? So we went ahead a little bit, but the Gemara says, you'd be able to learn Asi Kulu b'me'atzal, the bar mi Karen, except for Karen. You would not be able to learn Karen. Why? Because Karen, which is the case when the ox gores, you can push off the derivation by saying malakul shekin mu'adim tchilasim. You can't learn it from Karen. Karen is when the ox gores. The ox, when it gores, is not always prone to goring. It's not forewarned all the time, right? But the case of the animal eating or damaging, just for its own benefit, not because it's angry, that's something that the animal is always considered forewarned. It's something very normal, right? And the pit also, it's very normal for it to damage, and the person, right, and the fire is always going to damage, right? So therefore, that is a categorical difference between those and the case of Kara. In the case of the ox that gores because it's mad, that has a certain obligation to be forewarned. You need to know that this cow, right, or this ox is prone to damage, right? So therefore, it's different, right? Well, the Gemara says, well, Ulman da Omar Adraba, according to the one who says just the opposite, the case where the animal damages, Karen Adifa shekavanus alahazik. Of course, I would know that the ox is obligated. The owner of the ox is obligated in that case. You know why I would know? Because over there, kavanus alahazik, because the animal's intention specifically is to damage, right? So therefore, I feel Karen Nami asked you. Of course, you would be able to learn Karen, right? So even when the animal gores, you would be able to learn it from the other two. Why? Because of course over there he's obligated because the animal actually is intending to damage. Okay, right? So basically, the way we end off is that you really only would need two of them. You need bar, right? Because again, bar would not be able to be derived because bar is very, very singular. Bar is very unique. Because bar is inactive. It's inactive damager. It doesn't go out and damage like the other things. It sits there in its place and damages by someone else stumbling over it. So that's very unique. You need to have bar. But the Gemara says all you need is one other one, whether it's Karen or Shen V'Regel or the fire, right? That's all you need. And you'll be able to learn everything else. So why do you need each one? And now the Gemara is going to explain the uniqueness of each one. Why did the Torah have to teach you like this? Karen is l'chalik ben tamil mu'edes. The reason why I have to tell you Karen is when the animal gores. That's to explain to you that in that situation there is a difference between whether it's forewarned and it's not forewarned. Right? We know that if it's an animal that never, right, it's innocuous, it never
non-goring.
It never gored before, so then it only has to pay for half the damages. It's something uncommon. You pay only for half the damages. However, if it's been forewarned, you pay for full. Right? And therefore, the Torah actually has to teach that to us. Right? So we have the first one. Karen, of course, that we understand. You need a specific paragraph in the Torah to teach you this differentiation that doesn't apply to any of the other types of damages. Shen v'regel, eating and trampling, right? You need it to be written explicitly to say that you're potter b'shus harabim, the potter b'shus, to exempt you in public domain. Right? Shane is when the animal eats food that it just sees. Regel is when it damages something while it's walking, it tramples something, right? So in those situations, it's something that you can safely assume that a cow or anything, a cow that's walking in public property would do it. So therefore, if you stick your fruit or in public property, yeah.
In this case, would some market space be applicable, or is it specifically for that? Basically, it's walking and it knocks down a basket of apples.
Right. So I'm not liable. I'm allowed to bring my cow. I'm allowed to bring my ox.
Okay.
You make sure that
Of course, whatever.
Right, whatever. You make sure that your stuff isn't in a place where this is a place that's prone for damaging. And therefore you have to, right? So I'm exempt. However, if it's in a private property, right? And you bring your horse into my property, so of course, right? Of course, the person, the owner of the animal is going to be obligated, right? But again, that's a specific, unique qualification in Shen V'Regel, right? And specifically eating and trampling, that it only applies in Rishus Harabim. It only applies in Rishus Hayachin, in private property, not in public property.
Okay.
Right, the first one applies even in public property. If your animal gores my animal, even if it's in public property, you're still obligated. Okay. Now bar. What about the next one? Why do we need bar? What's unique about the case of pit? Besides for the fact that it's teaching me, right, that even though it's an inactive damager, you're obligated, but still there's something very unique to it. Liftar boyas hakelim. We said that there's a very unique halacha by bar, that if you damage vessels, utensils, right, not just the actual animal. Let's say my donkey falls into the pit and dies or gets damaged. So the owner of the pit is obligated to pay, right? However, if there were utensils on top of that donkey, I'm not obligated to pay for those utensils. What would be the thinking? Well, do you have any explanation as to why that would be true?
Me?
We talked about it a little bit.
Okay, so the donkey is falling into the pit and the utensils that get damaged by that you're not responsible for. Because I guess the donkey's carrying it, so it's kind of like out of legislature, but I'm more guessing here than anything.
Right. But it's a step removed, you're saying.
Yeah.
It's like more of a step removed. It's the donkey, maybe the utensils on top of the donkey or
No,
another.
because so the pit is not a damager for the utensils. Something is responsible for getting him in there. And that something, whether it has intellect or whether it tripped by accident, is liable for carrying it. Now, its responsibility doesn't propagate to the responsibility of the person who's supposed to cover the pit or put some sign to avoid it.
Interesting.
That's my thinking.
I like that theory. I like that. You're saying that the direct damager of the utensils is the donkey or whatever. It's not.
No. It's if you were to put a legal court, and I'm not a lawyer, but one would be a plaintiff and one would be the person that prosecutes or is I guess has a case against, right? So the plaintiff would have a case against somebody who just beat him up and put him into hospital, but he wouldn't, if that person was carrying something else and somebody else stole his wallet, why would this villain be responsible for that if some bomb comes onto the dropped body and empty pockets out?
Okay.
It's not related. It's a separate issues, and I don't see why one would mix them up.
Okay. I mean, the way you explained it in that situation, you're right. But if you directly caused me to get mugged because you beat me up, right? Let's say you beat me up in the street and then someone else comes and steals my wallet, right? So am I responsible? Well, you directly caused me to be vulnerable to be mugged.
Okay, there is some indirect little vulnerability. It's a human being who robs you later. It's not something that I can control or influence. If I did it, then it's a different conversation. But those would be two separate crimes.
Right. So
just like here again.
But it's interesting because in American law, there is something called indifference, which means that if you know something is going on, or if you caused something to happen to somebody else and something happens to them, they hold you responsible for that.
Even though it's indirect.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting. But I don't know. This is a concept we can see later on. It's called grama. Grama means cause. I caused it. I didn't directly cause it. It's an indirect causation. Grama, it's called. Gorem it literally means a cause, meaning it's not a direct thing. Now, the different cases of grama, some things are considered direct, some things are not direct. But over here, you see the Torah exempts you from the vessels, the utensils that are on top of the donkey. So Vlad is saying it's sort of an indirect thing because the direct damage of the pit damaged the donkey. So that is direct. Maybe that's why the Torah exempts you for the utensils, right? Because it's less direct, because it's a secondary thing, right? To which Lance is saying, yeah, but you see, the American system of law does obligate you for it if it's something that's inevitable, right? Okay, so
what if the person is sitting on top of that donkey and they both fall in and the person gets hurt? Are we not going to punish the pit maker for leaving the pit for both donkey and the person?
Yes, I think we would.
So when he carries utensils that are unmovable objects, my point was slightly different from what you're saying. It's
Okay.
not the fact that it's indirect. It's that utensils by themselves would never have fallen in a pit in the first place.
Ah, that's what you're saying. Okay, very
It has
nice.
nothing to do with this specific damager.
It's only if
It's only a live moving thing that can, or something that directs that.
oh wow, very nice svara. Right, by Aish, by fire, by when the ox damages, the ox could damage the utensil, the fire could damage the utensil, right? The person could damage the utensil, and therefore it's an equal standing. But when you're talking about a bar, when you're talking about a pit, that its very definition of damage is inactive, right? So
Right.
the only thing that could get damaged by a pit is something that is active, like a donkey, like an animal, right? But an inanimate object, like a kli, like a utensil, can never get to the pit on its own, right? Therefore, a pit can never can never damage it unless it's coming through a person, right? So therefore, it's not the pit. The owner of the pit is not liable. I hear very nice, very very nice, and this explains, right? Even if it's not indirect, right? That's what you're saying.
I don't like this indirect scenario because then the legal case would stand perhaps.
Right. I hear that's a very nice svara. I have to see if anyone says it, but it rings very true. You know, and if let's say for example, right, a person is wearing a fancy suit and he brushes by your car, which is parked in a weird way, right? And now I ripped my suit on your car. So even though there's no donkey here in the middle, it's direct. You would say it's a, you know, it's sort of, it doesn't make a difference. The point isn't that it's direct or it's indirect. The point is that an inanimate object, which is damaging, which we call a bar, right? That cannot be reliable for another inanimate object for a kli. Very nice. Okay. However, Rabbi Yehuda seems to say, he argues on this. Rabbi Yehuda says that you're obligated even for inanimate objects. So, Rabbi Yehuda de Mechayev al Nizke Kelim, according to him, what would be the special thing about bar, right? So we said bar has a special thing because you're exempt for utensils. But according to Yehuda, you're not exempt for utensils. That's a machlokas. That's an argument in the Tanaim, right? Yehuda de Mechayev al Nizke Kelim, the bar lifter boy as Adam, right? So according to him, the reason why it's the special thing about bar is that you're exempt for liability for the death of a person who was killed by falling into a pit. We'll have to see where he knows that from, right? But if a person falls, if a donkey the Torah's case is a chamar falling into a pit, a donkey falling into a pit. But if a person falls into a pit and the person dies, so then you're exempt. Now, this is also learned. It's sort of learned from a pasuk. We also have to think about. We have to think about the rationale, right? I don't want to get stuck in that right now because that's a sugya later on, right? But suffice to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we also found a unique thing in bar. Okay, Adam l'chayvei ba'arba dvarim. The next thing of hever, let's say hever, not hever, mave is talking about Adam. That's a person. So that's, you know why you needed to teach me that a person is obligated if he's a damager? Because he's not only obligated for the damages, he's obligated for another 4 things. What are the other 4 things? We mentioned them. Besides for the actual damage, you have to pay for doctor bills, you have to pay for the embarrassment, you have to pay unemployment, and you have to pay for the pain. Right? The amount of pain you caused them, we translate that into monetary value and we obligate you that. Okay. Now, just the last thing, Aish, lifter satama. Fire, if you know why fire is needed to be taught us by the Torah? Why is fire specific and needed? What's unique about fire? Gemara says, "Lifter bar satamin," to exempt if something is hidden. So let's say someone lights a fire, right? And then the fire through the wind goes and travels and burns up my barn, right? So if it burns up the barn, you're obligated for the barn, right? Let's say there's something hidden in the barn, hidden in the ground, and the fire gets to that too, right? Or in the grain, I have a pile of grain, and in my grain, I hid some dollar bills, right? So now, am I obligated for that? No, the halacha is we learn now that something that's hidden, fire is not exempt for. Fire is not liable for. It's exempt. Also, we learn from the examples of the Torah. The Torah talks about a pile of grain. Pile of grain is out in the open, not something that's hidden, right? You can just imagine a guy is negligent and he lets a fire escape his property and burn down his friend's house. All of a sudden, he gets a bill for millions of dollars, and he's like, "Whoa, yo, your house, your barn, whatever. Okay, it was worth $100,000. Why are you charging me millions? Yeah, well, the guy says, look, I had millions of dollars in cash hidden in the walls of the house. You know, we say, no, sorry, Charlie, you're not obligated. Only for what's noticeable. Only for something that's not concealed. Well, the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the mechayev on this kitaman, according to Rabbi, who deems one liable even for damage done to concealed object, he argues again, and he holds that even to concealed objects you're obligated to. So eish l'asuya mai. So what's special about eish? L'asuya lichicha niroi v'sichsecha avanav. It's a special case. It serves to add cases where the fire scorched another plowed field and cases in which it singed its stones. So even though the damaged object remains intact and is not consumed by the fire, one is still liable to pay for the damage caused. There's another special halacha that Eish brings along, that even though it didn't fully damage something, it didn't fully consume something, the stone is still there, the field is still there, but it scorched it, it singed the stone. Still you're obligated. Okay, that's a special thing. By the other damagers, maybe you're not obligated for such a type of damage where the object still remains intact. The object is still there, right? But it just damaged it a little bit by singeing the exterior or scorching it, you know. So in that situation, that is the chiddush of Eish. That's the fine. Okay, so far what we learned was a very interesting thing. Eish, fire, forgetting Rabbi Yehuda for now, Eish, you're exempt for Tamon, right? If something is hidden, you're not obligated if a fire damaged it, right? So now it's very important to know when dealing with whatever specific damage happens, we have to know how to categorize it. Because if it's categorized as Eish, right, so then it's not obligated for something that's hidden. If it's one of the other categories, you are obligated. If it's obligated as bar, you're not, yeah.
Now, when you finish your thought.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying what we said. Eish has a specific thing. If whatever damage it is, we categorize it, it's in the Eish line. Oh, you're part of the Eish category, so then you're exempt from something that's hidden. If you're part of the bar category, you're exempt from vessels, from utensils. If you're part of the Karen category, the gore, so then it depends. Were you forewarned or were you not forewarned? Maybe you only have to pay half or not. If you're part of the Adam, right, if it's considered Adam Amazik, so then you're not only obligated for the damage, you're obligated for all medical bills, right, and unemployment, right? So that's why it's very important to know which category of damager you are. Yes.
Let's say I had my house burned like that, God forbid, and I had a very expensive Van Gogh painting hanging on a wall. Now, when the fire dies down, it's very easy to prove the authenticity of that frame.
Okay.
Because not all of it really got destroyed, but the painting itself, the canvas is a goner.
Right.
Is this still the case where the causator of the fire doesn't pay?
Yes, I think so. I think it's a general rule. It's not only because it's not provable. It sounds like that that's the halacha. We learn it out from the verse that if it's hidden, you're not obligated for fire.
But it's not hidden.
Oh, okay. So then it's not hidden. The Van Gogh's not hidden. It's not hidden. It's not hidden.
But with the money, I can see that if they burn, there's no way to prove that they were there to begin with.
No, but let's say I have witnesses that say that right before the fire, they saw in my safe, they saw hidden in the ground $1 million cash.
Right.
It still wouldn't make a difference. We would still say you're exempt.
Okay. No, in that case, I guess it would still work the same way.
Right. I mean, when discussing these things, we always have to. We always have the question of why exactly are you obligated to pay? Are you obligated to pay because you should have watched it? You were expected to watch it, right? So something that I'm not expecting, maybe I'm not reliable for, right? The same way, something I do not have to expect, right? Let's say I'm allowed to, if I'm going hunting in a place where I don't expect people there or whatever, I would be exempt for certain things because it's not something I have to expect, right? Like we talked last week about the guy who's running in public, running right before Shabbos, right? You're supposed to expect people to be running, and so it's a marathon, and so too I'm exempt because if I'm running and damaging somebody, I'm not supposed to expect someone to just sit there, right? There's a question of damages in terms of the expectation, right? I'm exempt because there's no expectation, right? Or no, it doesn't make a difference whether you expect it or not. It has nothing to do with whether you're responsible of watching. It's not about you being responsible to watch the fire or not. And if you didn't have to be responsible for watching the fire for whatever reason, so you're exempt. No, it has to do with you caused it. I don't care whether or not you watched it, you know? It is like my ox goes out and gores. Am I obligated because it's my ox and I'm responsible for everything that my ox does? Or no, it's not because it's your ox. It's because you're responsible to watch your ox. And if I might find a situation where for some reason I was not responsible to watch my ox, so then I'm exempt. Or do we say, no, I don't care if you're responsible or you're not responsible. It's your ox, you're obligated, right? So too over here, my fire, right? It's my fire. I'm obligated to watch the fire. If you don't watch the fire, right? So then you're obligated. Or you would say, no, even if I didn't have to watch the fire, it doesn't make a difference because I caused it, right? So maybe you can, when you enter in the question of whether something that's not expected, something that's hidden, right? If it's my responsibility to watch the fire, it's because what is here and apparent and is noticeable and everyone knows about. So that's why I have to watch the fire to protect whatever I see, to protect everything that's around me, that it shouldn't get burnt, right? But I don't have to watch it from something that's not expected, right? Something that no one knows about, maybe I don't have to watch it. It has to be worked on. I'm not sure exactly, we have to see each one of these discussions is a whole sugya later on, but
let's not get too far into it then.
right. But these are the four differences. Now, I just want, because Jerry, he's not even here, but Jerry asked me, I'm recording it, and for Eric also, but Jerry asked me, what about cars? Right. So what do you think an automobile, a car today, right? We don't have oxen running around the streets. We have cars, right? What do you think a car is? A car, a shar? Is it the same type of thing like a shar? Is it like it's not a bar, right? A parked car is a bar. Right?
Let's do a scenario. I don't think there's a general categorization here.
Okay, I'm driving my car.
Yes.
And I drive it into your fence and I damage your fence.
But did your brakes just fail? Or were you drunk before?
Let's say
you see the critical difference in this?
No, well,
if your brakes fail, and you tried to stop the car but you couldn't, what does it become? It becomes like a natural event.
Yeah,
like wind blowing
you think I'm
something
exempt?
over, huh?
You think
But if you got drunk, if you put yourself in a position where you didn't have enough reaction to stop the car before the gate, then it's a different situation.
No, I understand that it's very different, but I'm asking you, if my brakes fail and I damage your property, you think I'm exempt because my brakes failed? maybe we wouldn't call it a murder.
I would, I would, in the worst case scenario, make this 50-50.
Oh yeah,
Interesting.
Because it's my.
This has nothing to do with him or you or whoever's driving the car.
What do you mean? It's my car. It's your car, and your car. Okay. You have to be responsible for your car.
That's not a normal behavior of a car. You lose control. I'm serious. Okay, what if you're walking with something heavy and it has a big canvas attached to it, and all of a sudden very, very strong wind blows and knocks down somebody and they break a leg or die or their field is destroyed? What do we do in that case? Because that's the scenario.
Okay, I mean, that's a scenario, but the halacha is that an adam, a person who damages, he's no matter what, even if it's a crazy scenario, you're obligated. The question is how far we take it, but we assume that even if something is not in your, you didn't cause it at all, it's something out of what you could have expected, but you yourself are damaging it, you're obligated. Adam muad la'olam. The halacha is a person is always considered forewarned.
Okay.
So that's if it's a person, but if it's my ox, then it's not. Right? So how do you view a car? Is a car like my ox, or is a car like me? If
I could not treat a car like a living object.
Oh, so you're saying that a car is not a living object. So if it's not a living object, so then it can't be considered a shar, right? A shar is different. A shar, an ox, has a mind of its own. It goes and gores, it has intention to gore. That's a whole different thing, right? And a car is an inanimate object.
Has no mind of its own until it starts failing and somebody takes over the computer system.
Okay, well, you're getting to self-driving cars, and that's the next question, right? Yes. But before we get to self-driving cars, how about a car itself? Would you say that because a person is driving it, then it becomes an extension of the person? If I have a stick in my hand and I hit someone over the head with the stick, right? Whether it's on purpose or by mistake, I'm swinging around my umbrella and I hit somebody. That's not considered a stick. That's a person damaged. I don't care that it was the stick and not my hand.
And yet, if I'm in the woods and I'm trying to knock down the tree and the head of my ox flies off and kills somebody, I'm not responsible.
You are responsible. It's just not
for the death, not for the murder.
Okay, it's not first degree murder. It's involuntary manslaughter. It's involuntary. I understand. It's without
intent. There's a difference already right there. And
for sure.
Now is much closer.
Of course, it's different. But we won't say that you're not obligated if it kills somebody. You're right. But if it damages something, you're obligated. Okay. Right? You have to be careful, right? So the other question is it Aish? It's not Aish. Aish is fire. Fire goes out on its own, right?
It's Aish when it's a self-driving car.
Exactly. So that's something to say that when it's self-driving, if it's not self-driving, so it needs a person to operate it, and it doesn't go anywhere without a person. So therefore, it can't be an Aish because the fire, it always goes on its own with the wind, right?
Well, no, somebody has to light the fire. So in the same way,
someone has to turn on the self-driving car, right?
So I think it's similar in that case.
Right. There was actually a case. It happened around 2 years ago in 2018. There was a woman. Her name was Elaine Hertzberg. Mm-hmm. I asked Yehuda Hertzberg. He said he's not related to her. She was in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, and it was like almost 10 o'clock at night. She was crossing the street. She was not on the crosswalk. And Uber was running tests on self-driving cars. It was a Volvo, and it was going a little bit fast. And there was a driver.
How's it going?
That was supposed to take over. There was a driver that was supposed to take over in case something happened. The driver was a second too late. Was a second too late to touch the brakes. A second too late to move the wheel, and it ended up killing this woman. Right, wow. So this was the first case where a fully self-driving car killed a person. Right, so it became a case. It became precedent, But And it was all discussed. There's a whole Wikipedia article about it if you want to read. But again, so this they want. This I saw an article also. They want to say it's Aish. If it's a self-driving car, so it's going on its own. It's all pre-programmed. The person has to turn it on, yes, but it's going on its own, right? It doesn't need a person to control it. So therefore, would be considered Aish, right? So again, the same consequences of Aish would apply. That if it damaged something that's hidden, right, you wouldn't be obligated for something that's hidden, right? However, if a person is driving the car, so then maybe it's considered Adam. It's like a person damages, right? So, well, you might argue. I wonder. Let's say you mentioned the case where the car's brakes fail, right? So if the car's brake fails, so then is that still considered controlled by a person, right? If a regular car and a regular person who's negligent, if he's drunk or whatever, he's negligent, right? He miscalculated and he caused damage. So then you could say, oh, look, it's just like a stick. It's a direct action of a person. But if the brake fails, so now it's not in my control anymore.
Well, this is almost like having an ox in a public domain, tripping over something while you're riding it.
Yeah, but the only thing is that they could make the case that if they knew that a person, like if they hit the brakes and they feel that the brakes are not steady and they just put it off, replacing it, and then God forbid something happens, then they could make a case like, oh, you should be careful.
So,
Right.
so the only argument I would make against that line of thinking, and not Lance, is just what I was saying earlier,
Yeah.
is that you really didn't have to get a license and get behind the wheel and get into that situation now. But being the norm of the world we live in, like if I lived in New Jersey, I couldn't go anywhere without a car.
Right.
It's kind of assumed by both the ones who are damaged and one who damages.
That there's
Correct or
a
incorrect?
right to drive a car. Right. But I would just add that we know the guy's liable no matter what. Even if it's a self-driving car, it's liable just like the person who lit the fire. Right? No one's question here is the guy, is he liable? Is he irresponsible for lighting the fire? Of course, the guy who lit the fire and let it go is irresponsible. But the question is what type of damage, what category of damage are we going to put this into for the consequences that we saw today in the Gemara? If you're Aish, then you're exempt for hidden things. If you're Bar, you're exempt for utensils, right? So, like we said, a car could be both. A parked car, right? I guess if it's parked in a way that's not normal, right? And you rip your shirt on it, so that's a bar. But it's a bar, so you're exempt because the bar is exempt for utensils. Unless you hold like a Yehuda, that a bar is even chayav for utensils, right? So a parked car could be a bar, right? But if it's a moving car, right? So then it depends. Is it self-driving? Is it still controlled by the person, right? So this is all interesting discussion to see how practically this would apply if we were to judge these cases in a Jewish court of law based on solely the Jewish approach.
Hi.
Hi, is that to me? But if somebody, right, today, it could be today, we would succumb to the American law, besides for the fact that most of the time it gets to court anyway, but, the Dina de Machusadina is the law of the land is considered the law in many places. So maybe even Jewish law would go based on whatever is the general understanding of who would be responsible. Okay. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining. We'll continue next week. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach.
Thank you for your services.
Good to see you, Vlad. Thank you for joining Lance.
Thank you.
Kol tov, b'atzlacha.
Tzlacha.